Gerson is the kind of character whose mere presence completely changes not only how the characters around him feel, but also how we, the player, feel. The first time we meet him is in Undertale, where Undyne tells us he was once the strongest warrior in the entire Underground, now running a shop and full of knowledge about monster history. In Deltarune, Gerson has already passed away, and it's his son who tells us what a great person he was, or rather still is, because he reappears in Chapter 3. This time with a clear mission: save Deltarune. But it's not like he's some OP hero who's going to single-handedly defeat the Titans or humble the Roaring Knight, though he probably could. Instead, Gerson arrives as a mentor, here to teach our heroes that a true hero is someone who fights with determination, regardless of what some silly prophecy says. And to understand how this old churro will change everyone's destiny, and what Susie has to do with all of this, we'll need to focus and listen very carefully. When you read a story, you don't start with the side characters, the extras, or the ones watching from a distance, hoping for one or two interactions in their entire existence. No, you start with your protagonists. You try to give them depth, to mold them, to write them a personality, and maybe an arc compelling enough to coexist with the main plot. And then there's Toby Fox, who was writing video game characters long before he even knew how to code his ideas into reality. It's incredible to think Undertale came out 10 years ago, and even back then, the groundwork was being laid for the Deltarune, the prophecy, and for Gerson, a character who is unexpectedly crucial to Deltarune. He represents justice, heroism, freedom, and above all, hope. The foundation of his story was already there in Undertale. We know that. In that universe, Gerson fought in the war between humans and monsters with his hammer and armor, serving as an inspiration for Undyne of the Royal Guard. But you know, Gerson is an incredible character not just because his backstory is interesting, though it is, but because of when he appears in the adventure. It's at a critical juncture in the chapter titled The Prophecy, where the main characters are confronted with a harsh truth: destiny, the hopes and dreams of their people, the end of the world, and the tragic price they must pay to restore balance. Gerson doesn't show up to steal the spotlight or boast about his deeds as an old warrior. His role isn't that of a legendary hero looking for a successor, but rather that of a mentor who teaches something far more valuable than strength: the power to question the inevitable. And the very first thing he does upon appearing is exactly that. He shatters the prophecy, both literally and symbolically. He hurls his hammer at the stained glass window that reads, "But here it is, with hope and dreams they send, three heroes at the world's end." The blow cracks the image until it's unrecognizable, interrupting the narrative that was already charting a destiny for our heroes. This isn't some simple destruction, it's a statement, a warning. Gerson bursts on the scene to tell us that stories, even those disguised as absolute truth, can be changed, that no story is sacred if you don't accept it as such, that even the most solemn prophecy can crumble with a simple question: what if it doesn't have to be that way? And that's what he represents: the right to rewrite, not as an act of whimsical rebellion, but as a deeply conscious one. Only free heroes, not those chained to a pre-written narrative, can truly change the world. We see this again and again in each of his appearances. Though it may not seem like it at first, his words and actions carry more weight than we might initially think. Case in point, later on, Gerson does it again. He breaks another part of the stained glass window and says, "Well, we were following that prophecy so closely I couldn't even see where I was going." What might sound like a joke about a forgetful old man takes on a different meaning. Deep down, it's a critique of how clinging to a revealed truth can blind you, that knowing too much can be a trap. Having the answer before you even have the question can prevent you from seeing the unwritten paths. This is reflected perfectly in Rousey. Unlike Chris and Susie, Rousey knew the prophecy from the very beginning. He didn't just believe it, he lived it as an unavoidable truth. And though he later admits to trying to change things on his own, he ended up surrendering to the same conclusion many reach when facing a seemingly fixed destiny, that all effort is futile if the end is already written. All that's left is to play the part you were given, even if it means giving up a piece of yourself. Rousey isn't a coward. What happens to him is far more human. He loses hope in the possibility of imagining another story. At some point, the prophecy stops being a guide and becomes a prison built of good intentions. This is where Gerson's voice cuts through with all its might, because every one of his phrases, delivered with a laugh, seemingly simple, carries a double meaning that points towards freedom, courage, and the right to doubt. When asked what he thinks of prophecies, Gerson doesn't respond with contempt, but with wisdom. They're just fairy tales. But he doesn't say this to discredit them. He says it to disarm them, to remind us that even the most beautiful stories, when taken as absolute, can blind us. They can become so bright that they block out any other path, filling everything with a false sense of certainty, a discouragement that seeps into every step we take. In the face of this blindness of the foretold, Gerson offers a radically humble alternative. It's best to believe in a glimmer here and there. Not the whole truth, not a fixed map, just little glimmers. Brief sparks of meaning, of beauty, of choice. Glimmers just bright enough to guide your next step, not to dictate your last. Because believing in a glimmer here and there isn't surrendering to ignorance. It's resisting the idea that everything has already been said and done. It's accepting that a story is something you walk, not something you repeat, and that even the faintest light can be more liberating than the most radiant truth if that truth was forced upon you. Now all of this, the shattering of the prophecy, the critique of absolute truths, the invitation to see beyond the imposed narrative, isn't just a one-off moment. It's an introduction to his teachings. And as any good teacher knows, repetition isn't a mistake. It's a pedagogical tool. It's a way to make an idea sink in, not just in the mind, but in the soul. Gerson shows up far more than you'd expect in a game that often hides its messages behind humor. And every time he enters a scene, he does so to confront, to challenge, and to sow productive seeds of doubt, especially in Susie, who becomes his primary student. Because if Gerson is the mentor, Susie is the student who, without knowing it, needed to hear him most. When he walks slowly toward his study, he forces them to stop, to match his pace. And when he seems lost on the path, he's also teaching them that moving forward doesn't always mean running. That sometimes, to find the true path, you have to take a step back, look with fresh eyes, and dare to start over. He says, there are no wrong answers, because there are no fixed destinies. Later, when Susie doubts her ability to heal, Gerson doesn't console her, he challenges her. He tells her she shouldn't give up, to try again. It's a small but profound human scene. Gerson doesn't demand perfection. He demands intention, because the future isn't built on what you get right the first time, but on what you insist on building, even when it hurts. And then comes the fight. There, in the heart of battle, Gerson delivers one of his most poetic lines. You have a white feather that shines with hope. He isn't talking to the warrior, he's talking to the writer. He's telling her that she wasn't born to repeat a script, but to write a new one that doesn't have to fit a narrative of sacrifice or doom, one that stems from the most radically heroic act of all, the ability to choose a kinder path. And the most beautiful part is that the seed Gerson plants in Susie doesn't just stay with her, because when Rousey sees the change in Susie, when he sees that smile he thought was impossible to reappear, he starts to believe too. To believe that maybe, just maybe, the story doesn't have to end the way everyone fears. That glimmer in Susie's smile Rousey mentions at the end isn't just a sweet moment. It's the resonance of Gerson's words, now vibrating in other hearts. It's the echo of the bells of justice, not as judgment, but as a possibility. We've talked a bit about who Gerson is and why I think he's such an incredible character, but beyond that, what does his appearance really mean? Is he just there for set dressing? Is he just a typical wise old man who spouts inspiring lines and then disappears? Or could it be that his presence is meant to make us a little uncomfortable? To make us look at everything from another angle? Because sure, the prophecy says one thing, the events we see in the game say another. And our desires as players, what we want to happen, are often something else entirely, and that's where everything starts to feel unstable. The prophecy could be wrong, or at least incomplete. There are enough clues that invite us to distrust it. The supposed hero with the sword is Susie, yes, but Susie can't even equip a sword in the game. The Queen's car, which we're told cannot be stopped, gets stuck in traffic. Paths diverge. The story loses its center. Nothing quite fits. And perhaps that's the clearest sign that destiny isn't set in stone. Some theories go even further. They say the only way to prevent the true prophecy from coming to pass is to break with it completely, to go through the Snowgrave route, to leave everything correct behind, to gain enough strength with Noelle, and to destroy everything from the outside. But I don't think that's the answer. I think Gerson is here to tell us the exact opposite. He's here to remind us that strength isn't found in breaking everything, but in not losing our dreams. That even when everything seems inevitable, hope is still a choice. He already told us this in Undertale. There will always be people who try to do the right thing. Not because a legend demands it, not because a prophecy orders it, but because it's the right thing to do. And no legend or prophecy speaks of that. This is the core of his entire appearance. He isn't just a wise old man. He's a voice that resonates loudly precisely when doubt is at its peak. An echo that cuts through everything. Chris, who is controlled by both the player and the entity behind the phone, Ralsei, who clings to the prophecy because it's the only thing he knows. But Susie, she's different. She doesn't need a divine sign, an ancient legend, or even a guarantee of success. She chooses. And that's what makes her the most real hero of them all. Not for fulfilling a prophecy, but for deciding not to be dragged along by one. That act, that choice, is what makes Gerson a pillar in her development. Not by teaching her a technique, or by revealing a secret, but by offering her something far more important. The conviction that writing a different story is truly possible, and that sometimes all it takes is for someone to say it out loud for you to start believing it. And of course, that conviction doesn't remain in words, it's put to the test on the battlefield. Because when Gerson confronts us as the Hammer of Justice, he isn't talking anymore. He's asking us directly, what will you do with the power to choose? The fight against Gerson, Hammer of Justice, is one of those battles you don't just feel, you remember. From the very first seconds, his battle theme evokes a clear sensation. I've been here before. And that's no coincidence. His song reuses a musical motif we first heard in Undertale during one of the game's most iconic fights, Undyne's with her Spear of Justice. You don't have to look far to see the parallel in the names. The spear, the hammer, both are weapons laden with symbolic weight. Both are symbols of justice. This isn't just a nod to the fans. It's a direct connection to the story. Gerson was Undyne's role model, her inspiration before Asgore. It was because of him that she wanted to be a hero. But what's most interesting isn't what they share, but what sets them apart. Both themes, both battles speak of justice, but they do so from very different places. Undyne's theme is tense, fierce, relentless. It feels like you're facing someone burning from the inside out. It has moments of pause, yes, but it's always on the verge of exploding. Undyne's justice is rigid. It's the justice of someone who believes the right thing must be done even if it hurts, even if it costs you everything, even if no one else understands why. Gerson is different. His theme doesn't run, it doesn't explode. It walks. It has an imposing strength, yes, but it's never aggressive. It feels more like a lesson that gets under your skin, as if every note is saying, listen, don't fight for the sake of fighting, learn why you fight. Gerson's justice doesn't seek to impose itself, it seeks to guide. And you can see that even in how the battle unfolds. He doesn't crush you, he doesn't corner you, he tests you, yes, but he always gives you room to breathe, to think. Because this time, what's at stake isn't your strength. It's your will to keep learning, your capacity to grow, even after you failed, your desire to write a different future, even though you know how the story ends. And if we're talking about fundamental differences, there's one that stands out above all: freedom. In Hammer of Justice, a very particular motif resonates, the one fans have dubbed the freedom leitmotif. A subtle melody, but one loaded with meaning. This theme first appeared in the fights against Yevil and Spamton, two characters so different from each other, yet united by a common obsession: to be free. Free from the rules, free from their bodies, free from the system, each in their own way. For Yevil, freedom is pure chaos, doing anything anytime without reason or consequence. For Spamton, it's more structured, but just as desperate. A financial freedom, a freedom of consumption, of value, that ultimately becomes another prison. But beyond their delusions and speeches, there's something they both have in common. The item they give us upon defeat. The Shadow Crystal. A dark crystal that apparently serves no purpose. But if we use it, Chris begins to see the world differently. In Chapter 1, they see toys on the floor. In Chapter 2, a laboratory. In Chapter 3, a shattered television. In Chapter 4, the lobby of a church. And it's no coincidence. These crystals seem to be a crack in the narrative, a window into something larger, a clue that the secret bosses knew something the others didn't, that they understood, even partially, the true nature of the world. And that's why they were so desperate. That's why they screamed for freedom, because they had seen what was behind the curtain. Even Rouse, who lives in the dark world, seems to carry that same insecurity. They themselves call the light world real life, as if deep down they know they're trapped in something they can't control. But Gerson? Gerson breaks that pattern. In his theme, the freedom leitmotif also appears. It's there, like a distant echo of the other secret bosses. But this time, it doesn't repeat. It doesn't develop. It never reaches completion. It's left unfinished. Not because it's missing something, but because he doesn't need it. Gerson didn't have to use a shadow crystal. He always had it, but he never asked for it because he was never lost. And that musical motif, which in other characters sounds like a choked scream, is cut short here almost serenely, as if he himself were saying, I don't need to see beyond to know what's right. And that's what makes him different. Jevil and Spamton sought freedom as an escape. Gerson lives it as a choice. One that he makes every day, without needing a cosmic revelation or a break in the code. Just a resolve to do the right thing, even when no one is asking. Gerson's teachings reach their peak just when all seems lost. In the final stretch of Chapter 4, when the heroes face the Titan, a colossal creature, a living symbol of the inevitable. The battle seems completely one-sided. There's no strategy, not enough strength, and most disturbingly, not even Rouse knows what to do. The same Rouse who had led much of the battle is now paralyzed. The plan has failed. Words are not enough. And for a moment, the silence feels louder than any spell. But right then, just as the fear becomes palpable, Gerson appears one last time. Not as a divine savior, but as what he always was, a teacher. His presence, without needing any long speeches, brings back everything he taught us from the beginning, that giving up is never the only option, that trying again, even when it hurts, is still an act of bravery, that there are paths not found in any prophecy which can still be the right ones. And this time, he teaches not with words, he teaches with action. At the peak of the battle, when all seems lost, Gerson fights alongside Susie, and it's not just a spectacular scene. It's the circle closing, the old mentor and the rebel student united by the same cause, the same conviction. And together, they achieve the impossible. They weaken the Titan. They don't destroy it completely, but they make it fall, lose its strength, and reveal its weak point. It is then that Susie, no longer just a warrior, but a leader, makes the final decision. It's she who comes up with the idea of sealing the Titan as if it were a dark fountain, of using Chris's own soul as a key to contain the chaos. A risky, creative, unpredictable decision, but one that is profoundly hers, and profoundly influenced by her teacher. Because that's what Gerson accomplished. He didn't just inspire strength, he fostered judgment. He didn't teach what to do, but taught how to decide. And in that final moment, what we see isn't just the fall of a Titan. What we see is the victory of a philosophy, the proof that the future can be changed when someone dares to imagine it differently. And yes, I know, Gerson is dead. The game says so. The player knows it, the characters assume it. The dark world of the church simply gave him life, like a shadow, an extension, or perhaps an echo of what he once was. But that's precisely why it's even more powerful. Because like any good writer, Gerson continues to teach even after his death. His lessons don't need a body. They live on in the words he left behind, in the choices he inspired, metaphorically, and within the very framework of Deltarune, also literally. And I think that, in the end, that is the true point of his character. He isn't here to shine, or to save us, or even to be right. Gerson is here to inspire, to guide, to teach To be the kind of teacher who doesn't give answers but instead asks such well-crafted questions that make you want to find your own answers. He doesn't humiliate, he doesn't correct harshly, he doesn't impose. He simply asks and lets the seed grow. And of course, he only achieves this because he knows the story. Because as a historian, as a witness of legends, he understands that none of them are set in stone, that everything can change, even the most ancient narratives. He knows how a legend is formed. He knows that not even Dragon Blazers, Lord of Hammer, or Deltarune itself have to be repeated in the same way. Because in the end, stories can always be written differently, in ways we never imagined. And that is where his strength lies. Not in the hammer he wields, but in the voice he leaves us even when he's gone. A voice that, in the darkest moment, when all seemed lost, reminded Suzy that there is always another way. And because of that, the Titan fell. Not through power, but because of an idea. The message he gives is not just for Suzy. It is not just for Chris. It is for us. For those of us playing the game. For those of us who have followed theories, read lines of code, compared maps and patterns, hoping to decipher an inevitable ending. But what if the point was never to guess the ending, but rather to learn that the ending can be changed? Deltarune isn't about discovering the truth, it's about daring to rewrite it. And that is where Gerson could be the key to changing everything. Because if there's anyone who knows how a legend is formed, it's him. He was the one who wrote them down in Undertale. He was the one who inspired heroes, who kept the stories, who watched from the shadows while others fought. And now he finally takes the stage. He's no longer the old man who tells tales. He's the old man who breaks the tale. And in doing so, he leaves a choice in our hands. Are we going to follow the path we already know? Or are we going to be like Suzy and choose another? Perhaps that is the true battle of Deltarune, not the one fought with actions or spells, but the one fought against expectations. Against the idea that we can't change anything. And if Gerson is right, if a single glimmer is enough to start writing anew, then maybe, just maybe, there's still time to choose a different ending.